There exists a person whose heart holds profound love for you. Yet this individual has deliberately chosen to maintain distance between you. Before your mind starts racing and searching for explanations, I need you to pause for a moment and breathe deeply. The message you're receiving right now isn't just something ordinary or random. This specific instant, this conversation, and the timing of it all represent something significant. It's evidence and confirmation from somewhere much greater than what we normally perceive. It's the truth your intuition has been quietly longing to hear all along, hidden beneath all the confusion and all the questions without answers that have been part of your life. There is nothing accidental happening here. Nothing is random or meaningless. The universe occasionally reveals its deepest truths, but you can only notice them when you slow down enough to genuinely listen. Your soul already comprehends what is real and true. There exists someone in your life, or perhaps someone who was once very important, who carries intense devotion they struggle to express in words. They experience an overwhelming emotion they don't know how to manage, a longing they cannot eliminate no matter how much space they create between you two. Don't mistake their quiet behavior for a lack of feeling. Their quietness actually overflows with powerful emotions that build inside them. As their love intensifies, their impulse to pull back grows stronger as well. It's as if caring for you has become both a beautiful gift and the most difficult thing they've ever encountered. This is something their heart knows deeply. Despite what their actions attempt to communicate, they keep distance because you touched something fundamental within them. You awakened something that was dormant, something buried under years of emotional self-protection. If you relate to someone who loves you but keeps withdrawing from you, recognize this moment. As Carl Jung observed, when two souls meet, it's like two chemical elements coming together. If there's any reaction, both transform. That's exactly what happened between you and this person. You changed them in significant ways. You helped them recognize aspects of themselves they'd never revealed to anyone else. You broke down walls they'd constructed so carefully over time. You accessed a part of their spirit that even they didn't know existed within them. You're not simply another person in their life. You function like a mirror, reflecting both their greatest desires and their deepest fears. You show them what they want and what they're terrified of losing. You reflect their hopes and every old wound they never healed. They've never experienced feelings this intense, this genuine, or this impossible to control. You removed their protective barriers without even attempting to. When they're near you, their soul feels completely exposed, open and unguarded. And being vulnerable was something they were never taught, felt safe. You arrived unexpectedly, without being part of their original plan. But this sudden arrival shifted their entire world in ways they still can't adequately describe. They didn't anticipate the electricity that happens when you talk, the profound peace when you're present, or the terrifying understanding that your absence would feel like losing the oxygen they breathe. This person maintains distance, not from lack of caring, but because of a paralyzing terror about the enormous emotional influence you hold over their spirit. You've become the person whose thoughts and words carry more weight than anything or anyone else, making you a mirror they're not yet brave enough to face. If you have someone who deeply loves you but deliberately stays away to protect their fragile sense of self, then loving you feels like stepping off a high cliff without knowing whether anything soft waits below. So instead of taking that risk, they stay frozen in a state of self-imposed isolation. Their distance is essentially a quiet confession of something they can't say out loud. They genuinely believe you deserve someone more whole, more healed, and more stable than they currently feel. They obsessively review past failures and old conversations, anxious that their unhealed parts will bring chaos into something that feels sacred and precious and too valuable to damage. Inside their silence lives a soft voice, haunting them, insisting they're not ready enough yet to meet you as their best self. If this describes someone you know, understand that their quietness is actually a protective wall built from their own feelings of inadequacy. They sense your bond in the deep emotional spaces where pure logic cannot navigate. And no matter how far they travel, you remain a permanent presence within their inner world. Every temporary distraction disappoints them, and every replacement feels empty because their heart stays devoted to the essence of what you shared together, even while their mind fights against the vulnerability you represent. As Carl Jung wrote, "What you resist persists." Their efforts to push you away have only made the connection stronger and more inescapable within their unconscious mind. Their silence is rich with truths they cannot voice, and it carries the heavy burden of past disappointments that taught them closeness brings suffering, making you feel both invaluable and dangerous to their peace. They are slowly trying to overcome this fear because they recognize that their heart is fighting to move past it. They are testing their own strength, trying to see if they can function alone before they're capable of standing alongside you. Beneath the facade of independence and within the quiet of night, they lie awake, crumbling under the weight of everything left unsaid. They intuitively understand that even a single step toward you will transform their entire existence, a transformation for which they don't yet feel ready or prepared. Their absence is a self-created exile, a desperate attempt to silence their inner chaos before it meets the profound stillness of your presence. They recognize that one moment of complete honesty will make their emotions impossible to deny and impossible to take back, and once that truth exits their lips, there's no returning to the safety of remaining hidden. To love you means committing to everything. And they're currently paralyzed by the thought of giving that much of themselves. They hide behind the illusion of a perfect time arriving someday, waiting until they feel stronger or until life becomes simpler. But their spirit understands that healing doesn't wait for convenience. Even from far away, they're haunted by the question of whether your heart still reserves space for them or if you finally close that door permanently. The deep reality is that they will return. Not when they're perfect, but when the pain of missing you finally outweighs the terror of their own vulnerability. While they may appear perfectly fine and undisturbed to the outside world, this separation is a quiet suffering that wounds them whenever the noise of daily distractions fades away. They miss you not as a simple memory, but as the only place where they ever genuinely felt at home, a recognition that everything felt lighter and more authentic when you were near. As Carl Jung observed, until the unconscious becomes conscious, it will direct one's life like fate. Their hidden fears of being undeserving have guided their retreat, but their soul continues being pulled toward the light you provide. This marks a major turning point in their destiny, an opening that demands the very honesty they've spent years avoiding. They are preparing themselves to welcome the version of themselves that finally chooses truth over fear. At night, when sleep escapes them and they're staring at the ceiling, they think about words never spoken, apologies owed, truths held back, and chances they wish they could relive. They contemplate reaching out. They imagine exactly what they would say if fear didn't paralyze them. They compose lengthy messages they never send. They type out deep thoughts and then delete everything. They look at your name on their screen, hoping for the courage to appear. They rehearse conversations they're too afraid to start. Every attempt ends with the same anxiety. What if it's already too late? What if you've moved forward without them? What if the door has closed permanently? Even with those worries, they cannot stop hoping you still feel the connection. They wonder if you still recognize the bond underneath all the quiet. They wonder if your heart still knows theirs the way theirs knows yours. They wonder if your spirit still reaches out to them during the still moments. There are nights when they're convinced you must be thinking about them as well. Moments when your name surfaces suddenly as if pulled by an invisible thread. They're afraid of losing you completely. Even though they create the distance, it's a confusing way to protect themselves, pushing away the very thing that could genuinely heal them. They live within a contradiction. They run from their strongest desire. They remain silent about what they most desperately need to communicate. They deny themselves the love that could change their life because they've never truly accepted that they deserve something this real and genuine. If they seem distant or uncaring, understand it's only a mask, a protective mechanism, a survival strategy. They learned early that showing vulnerability means danger, depending on others means weakness, and loving intensely means future heartbreak. So they built massive and thick walls, then you arrived and gently broke through them without even trying. That's exactly why they step back. That's why they disappear. Sometimes they attempt to reconstruct those walls, but every attempt fails because their heart consistently chooses you. No matter how hard their mind fights for control, they wait for the right moment to surrender. Deep within, they know no perfect moment exists for something this powerful. They keep telling themselves they need additional time to become the person they hope to be, more time to heal, more time to grow, more time to understand how to love without fear. But time has become their own prison. Every day of waiting makes the space feel harder, not easier. Every day of silence adds more pressure. Every day of pretending adds weight to the truth they're carrying. They imagine returning with strength, honesty, and bravery, without shaking or doubt. They picture walking toward you, knowing exactly the right words to say. But life doesn't pause for perfect courage. Love doesn't wait for perfect healing. Sometimes the only option is to jump without seeing the landing. They are slowly learning that waiting for perfection causes people to lose what truly matters most. They stand still, wanting to move forward, but stuck in place. They feel the universe gently pushing them toward you while fear pulls in the opposite direction. They try to calm their inner struggles long enough to listen to the deeper truth inside them. They're deciding whether to continue living behind emotional armor or finally surrender to the bond that refuses to fade. They think perhaps you've become stronger without them. Perhaps you've learned to continue moving forward. Perhaps you've stopped searching for them. The thought of that possibility causes them pain they can't easily resolve. They would rather stay quiet and torture themselves than face the potential discovery that they waited too long. But underneath all the fear and delay, one powerful truth remains absolutely constant. They never stopped loving you. The distance didn't happen because love became weaker. The distance exists because love grew so enormous they couldn't hold it without feeling overwhelmed. They're not gone forever. They're gathering their strength. They're building courage piece by piece. They're fighting an internal battle between their terror and what's meant to be. They're learning the difficult lesson that there's no growth without some pain. Through that process, one clear understanding has become stronger than any fear or doubt. They cannot heal without honesty. They cannot move forward without courage. The worries are becoming less powerful. The heart is becoming stronger. The silence is starting to break. The distance is becoming smaller. Something inside is preparing for the moment when they stop running away. When they turn and face what they avoided, it will be with clarity, with honesty, and with the kind of truth that only emerges after a long internal struggle. Because what they feel for you is not temporary or passing. It's not something imagined. It's not short-lived. It's a deeper calling, a soul recognition, and a connection that transcends space, quiet, and time. Soon the silence they once used to feel safe has become too heavy to continue carrying. The distance they thought would bring clarity has started feeling like a prison. Every day without you weighs more than the previous day. Every moment of pretending to be fine becomes harder to maintain. What they tried to push down is now rising up powerfully. What they tried to ignore is now loud enough to wake them. They can sense the transformation, the shifting inside, and the end of every excuse that let them hide. There arrives a moment in every major change when staying the same causes more pain than facing the unknown. They have reached that moment. Their mind is exhausted from battling something too powerful to defeat. They're starting to recognize that they're not protecting themselves by staying away. They're actually losing pieces of themselves. They're losing time they cannot recover or get back. When the world becomes quiet for a moment and no distractions remain, they find themselves whispering your name without meaning to. They reach for their phone without thinking. They search through old memories for the sound of your laughter, the warmth in your eyes, and the peaceful feeling of simply being near you. They replay the words they wish they had said, the times they chose their fear instead of honesty. They see now how they walked away from the person who understood them completely, accepted them entirely, and made them feel truly known like no one else ever could. They think about conversations left incomplete and feelings that never became words. They imagine reaching out, and that idea both terrifies and comforts them. They wonder if your voice would tremble, if your eyes would become warm, and if your heart would still recognize theirs. They wonder if there's still room for them in your life, or if too much time has passed. The struggle between fear and regret continues fighting inside them. They're beginning to realize that every time they quiet their authentic feelings, they betray their own heart. Every time they choose distance, they choose suffering. Every time they deny their emotions, they deny who they truly are. They're exhausted from carrying endless what-ifs. They're tired of living only halfway. They watch your life from a distance without letting it show. They look for signs of you with care. They read your words, searching for hidden meaning. They wonder if you still smile when remembering them. Some days, they're absolutely certain you must be thinking of them too, like energy passing through space. Other days they worry they've become only a distant memory, but the pull remains constant regardless. They're understanding something they missed earlier. You cannot substitute for a soul connection. You cannot run from true destiny. You cannot escape the person you're meant to be with. They've lived through enough empty days to finally realize that life eventually punishes those who choose the false comfort of safety instead of the raw honesty of their own hearts. The universe has guided them through countless small signs, random words that felt like messages, and moments that felt orchestrated, proving that destiny doesn't speak quietly forever. They're finally paying attention because losing you has become the one outcome they cannot survive with or justify to their own soul. The shift from running to returning is happening right now because they see that their protected distance was actually a slow and agonizing loss of their own life force. Healing is finally happening because they've become brave enough to stop running from closeness and allow themselves to be seen in their complete, unpolished truth. They're mentally preparing for the moment of return, picturing themselves finally speaking the words they've held inside for so long. I'm sorry. I wasn't prepared, and I never stopped loving you. They understand that you're the one person who cannot be replaced. You're the one who awakened a part of their spirit that can never return to sleep. The realization has struck them that waiting any longer brings the danger of permanent regret, a weight far heavier than the fear of vulnerability. Every morning without you serves as a painful reminder of what their fear made them lose, proving that silence didn't reduce their feelings but only made them grow more patient and stronger. They once believed distance would help them forget, but instead it functioned as a mirror that made your memory deeper and their own world more hollow. They are returning because true love refuses to give up, and the pain of your absence has finally become a burden too heavy to carry alone. When they stand before you again, it will be with a clear mind and true devotion, ready to embrace the risk of genuine connection instead of the false security of being alone. Their return is not a question of if, but when. And that moment is approaching more quickly than you might realize. The silence that once seemed permanent is beginning to crack. The distance that once felt absolute is starting to shrink. The person who loves you deeply and hasn't known how to say it is gathering the strength and courage to finally speak. They are becoming ready to choose you, completely and without reservation. They are learning that real strength is not found in running away, but in turning around and facing what frightens you most. They are discovering that the bravest thing they can do is admit they were wrong to leave, that they were foolish to create distance, and that they cannot continue living without you. And when that moment finally arrives, when they return not with uncertainty or hesitation, but with honesty resting plainly in their hands, something inside you will quietly understand why none of this unfolded the way you once desperately wanted it to. The waiting that once felt unbearable will begin to reveal its hidden purpose. The confusion that kept you awake at night, replaying memories and searching for meaning in every silence, every distance, every unanswered feeling, will no longer feel like meaningless suffering. You will begin to see that something important was being shaped beneath the surface all along. Because love, the kind that changes a life, rarely arrives in its highest form immediately. It asks things of us first. It asks us to confront ourselves. It asks us to sit with loneliness without allowing it to turn into bitterness. It asks us to learn the difference between longing for someone and losing ourselves inside that longing. And perhaps hardest of all, it asks us to trust that not everything unfinished is abandoned and not every silence is absence. There was a time when the pain may have felt deeply personal, as though their distance was proof that you were not enough, as though their silence was confirmation that what existed between you had somehow failed. But time has a quiet way of changing perspective. What once felt like rejection slowly begins to look more like preparation, because neither of you were standing in the same place emotionally when this first began. There were fears that had not yet been acknowledged, wounds that had not yet been understood, parts of yourselves still speaking through defense instead of truth, and love cannot fully grow in spaces where fear is doing all the talking. Sometimes life pulls two people apart, not because the connection is weak, but because the connection matters enough to demand growth. It creates distance so clarity can emerge. It allows silence so truth can finally become impossible to ignore. It lets longing stretch across time so both people are forced to ask themselves difficult questions. What am I truly afraid of? What kind of love am I actually capable of giving? What habits have I mistaken for protection that are quietly keeping me disconnected from the very thing I say I want? These are not easy questions. They arrive quietly, often in moments no one else sees. During sleepless nights, during ordinary afternoons that suddenly feel heavy for reasons impossible to explain. During the strange moments when someone realizes that despite every distraction, despite every attempt to move on emotionally without fully understanding what happened, one truth keeps returning. Something real existed here. And once something real reaches that level of recognition, it becomes difficult to bury. What changes during separation is not only the relationship itself, but the people inside it. You begin to understand yourself more deeply. You stop settling for half-heartedness. You stop abandoning your own needs simply to preserve closeness. You learn that loving someone does not mean shrinking yourself or sacrificing your peace in the hope that they might someday choose you fully. You begin building something steadier inside yourself, a kind of inner trust that no longer depends entirely on whether another person stays or leaves. And on the other side, something shifts in them too. Fear slowly loses some of its authority. The comfort of avoidance starts to feel emptier than vulnerability. The walls that once seemed necessary begin to feel heavy. What was easier before, silence, distance, pretending not to care, no longer feels sustainable. Because growth changes what a person can tolerate. Once someone truly sees the emotional cost of their own fear, they cannot entirely go back to not knowing, and courage begins quietly. Not with dramatic declarations, not with sudden certainty, but with small moments of truth gathering enough weight to finally move someone toward action. A realization here, a moment of regret there, a memory that keeps returning, a feeling that refuses to disappear despite every attempt to dismiss it. Slowly, what once felt impossible starts becoming necessary. And when they finally return, if they do, it will not feel like stepping backward into what once was. It will feel like arriving somewhere entirely different, somewhere wiser, calmer, more intentional. Because this time the connection will no longer be fueled by confusion, anxiety, or the desperate need to hold on before something disappears again. It will feel grounded, honest. There will be a different kind of presence between you, one built not on fantasy but understanding. You will know each other in ways you could not before because both of you will have met yourselves more honestly in the time apart. The misunderstandings that once created distance will no longer hold the same power. The ego will feel quieter. The need to protect every vulnerable feeling will loosen. And what replaces it is something much rarer. Two people willing to meet each other without armor. That is why the pain mattered. Not because suffering itself is noble, but because sometimes difficulty removes every illusion standing in the way of what is real. It teaches you what actually matters. It strips away fantasy and replaces it with truth. It reveals the difference between attachment and devotion, between fear and love, between chasing and choosing. You will understand that none of those tears were wasted. None of the nights wondering if things would ever make sense happened without reason. They were shaping something in you: strength, clarity, self-respect, emotional honesty, the kind of maturity that makes lasting love possible rather than temporary intensity. So hold gently onto hope, not the kind of hope that asks you to stop living while waiting, but the kind that allows your heart to remain open while still continuing to grow into yourself. Keep becoming who you are meant to be. Keep building a life that feels meaningful and whole. Keep choosing yourself without closing the door on possibility. Because sometimes love leaves for a season only to return transformed. Sometimes silence is not the ending of the story, but the chapter where both people finally learn how to become ready for it. And sometimes the person who once could not show what they felt slowly becomes brave enough to stop hiding from their own heart. When that day comes, if it comes, you will not need to force clarity. You will feel it. The truth will arrive quietly, like dawn replacing darkness, without needing permission to rise. You will understand that what felt broken was also becoming. That what looked like distance was, in ways impossible to see at the time, preparation. Your story is not defined by the chapter where things became painful. It is defined by what both hearts learned in the silence that followed. And maybe, just maybe, what once felt unfinished is not ending at all. It is only now approaching the chapter where everything finally begins to make sense.